This is going to be pretty big news for all you Bitcoin investors out there. Okay, so I have some insider knowledge for you, and this is all speculation. I'm not a financial advisor, but what I will tell you is that I think that by the end of this year or the beginning of next, you're going to hear a big announcement from Epic Games and Disney and a couple other big companies that they're going to attempt to, or may already be pretty deeply invested in making this metaverse. So if you go on Google, and I'll post links in the chat as well, so Lev can put them up later. There's a ton of articles that have been coming out over the last 5 or 6 months where there's just these big sites like Forbes and all these other news sites just pushing this metaverse idea and demanding that Silicon Valley create this metaverse, this new layer to the internet. And it's just funny because they already control us enough by giving us the JavaScript butt plug and forcing us to basically interact with Web 2.0 by executing code on our own machines. And now they're going to be able to simulate all dimensions, X, Y, Z. They're going to control time and space, and that's the end game right there. But Disney and Epic have so much to gain from including all of these different corporations in this one gigantic Ready Player One hellscape. And it's just going to be interesting to see how that could influence the market, especially if the rumor's true that V-Bucks are going to be on Binance by 2021.
Oh man.
There you go. So that's a good starting topic. I think that means a lot for VR.
What are V-Bucks? Just for people who don't know.
V-Bucks are the currency of Fortnite, apparently. I've never played Fortnite, but I guess I should stay up to date on this kind of stuff.
I think Penguin coins, they're gonna be V-Bucks hard. Yeah, it's making a swing back. Okay.
No, I gotta disagree. Invest in Dogecoin now while you're ahead.
All three great options.
So how many properties are we talking about here? We're talking about Disney, Fortnite. Well, I guess
the only that I'm certain of at this point, and I stalk people on LinkedIn. I have like a gigantic Excel spreadsheet of, I don't know, like thousands of people in different companies, and I just follow them. And I don't like actually go and stalk their pages, but I've got like RSS feeds set up. I've got a ton of automation. I've got let's put it this way, I've got a good tool chain for OSINT, and I just follow all of these guys because I'm super interested. And the little birdie said there's a meeting between HBO, Disney, and Epic at the moment, and that's happening in New York. So just keep your eyes open. I think we're going to hear something really big from them soon, because there's been lots of articles over the last month about this metaverse. Like Fortnite wants to expand it beyond just a mere game and probably include other IPs, basically.
So, like, you mean like a movie or TV show or something like that?
Oh no, well beyond that.
Oh, man.
I mean, they're instead of competing with television, they'll be competing with Urbit. Like Curtis Yarvin will be their main competitor, I think, because that's what it sounds like they really want to do, is they want to make this third life. They want to make the next Second Life. And maybe even make room for the weirdworlds.com outsiders too, because hey man, the more people you get, the better. And that's going to provide a lot of opportunities for interesting groups of people online and entryists to do some crazy stuff if there's like this corporate sanctioned metaverse VR internet. Think about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned the whole Fortnite thing, because I think it was either today or yesterday they just announced that it was coming out of early access. So I'm not entirely sure what that implies, but it probably has some connection to what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see, because I don't think they're just going to go for VR with this Fortnite metaverse. I think they're going to have a client for people that don't have VR headsets, but they're definitely going to try to get more people on VR, especially if they get a partnership with someone like Oculus.
Yeah.
So it's going to
I can't imagine what it's like to live in a place controlled by corporations. I just really have no idea what that's actually like.
Everywhere.
So, yeah. Do you think Fortnite is being 14 days is somehow a reference to the doomsday clock, and how we're a fortnight away from being trapped inside the next matrix underneath us? Does anyone have those concerns about the metaverse?
Well, this was a show that Jules and I were interested in creating, where it was about this Matrix-like virtual reality world that kept people in this sense of constantly wanting to get more stimuli through this world, but as a result their bodies started to atrophy, even though like they were connected to whatever, like, you know, pumps to take all the, you know, all the disgusting matter out of their bodies in these pods. But the idea here is that we're going to be outsourcing a lot more functions of this human world to a world that's going to be a lot more tightly controlled, thereby sacrificing a lot of willpower. Because I personally think that, and I think Cowboy may agree with me on this, that we are the creators of our own reality. And if we're not the ones who are creating the reality, if we are trapped by another layer of somebody else's idea, then it's going to be that much tougher to get out of it and to exert our own willpower.
Yeah, well, I mean, just look at the preponderance of Minecraft and look at all the applications that these people have for this game. Because when I started playing Minecraft, it was still really early on, and I had no idea that there was all of this, these weird Minecraft conventions. So I quit for a while playing that game, just out of, I didn't want to be associated with dedicated whim. I just didn't want to play a game where you have maybe a bit superficial. But I did come back, and one of the most interesting applications I saw was that there was a do you know the memory palace concept for like learning things?
Yeah.
And okay, so memory palace, for people that don't know, memory palace is this thing where you visualize a mansion or a palace or a building in your mind, and in order to learn something, you structure these rooms around abstract representations of the concepts that you're trying to learn. So if you're learning like mathematics, then you can make a room dedicated to a specific concept in algebra or something like that. So the idea is that you're making this space that you can move through. It's a mnemonic technique for learning. And I went to this server with a bunch of kids that they were learning various topics at school, and some of them were middle schoolers, and they would make these gigantic buildings where they would create representations of the stuff that they wanted to learn. So even if you have like a big corporate owned property like Minecraft, which is, I mean, is it the same thing as Fortnite? No, but even if you have this corporate IP, I still think that you can get some interesting stuff emerging out of that. And I think that if they're actually trying to make this gigantic metaverse network of all of these different intellectual properties, they're never going to be able to completely stifle and control what goes on inside of their game. And the other thing is that from a security perspective, having that kind of world where it's not just scrolling through Twitter and you're actually moving through 3D space, that's just going to be the repeat of Second Life hackers. There's a whole extra dimension and attack vector, and that's a huge security concern for them as well. So it's more asymmetric than it appears. It's not just going to be all of like consolidating all these properties and everybody is in lockstep with the company's wishes for what the game is going to be. It's going to be more like asymmetrical.
So you were talking about weird Twitter, or I don't remember exactly the phrase you used, but you were talking about outsiders also being something that these companies would want to seduce into their platform. People who wouldn't really be normie tier.
No, they would definitely want people like that. And I mean, there are companies that profit from that kind of weird community right now, just like Twitter. Like, you just brought up the example of, you have all these weird people on Twitter that came over from image boards and other weird places on the internet, comparatively speaking, compared to Twitter, compared to the average Twitter user. This Manda is here, and it's just a weird phenomenon. And that's the exact same thing will happen. And it's going to be even crazier when it's in 3D, when you're walking around inside of Twitter. I mean, because going after someone on Twitter is one thing, and making memes of people is one thing. But if you're able to just physically gate crash their stuff, it's going to be like Zoom rooms, but even more traumatic. You're going to have interesting things going on if they actually are investing in this, which is why, of course, they're going to spend a lot of money making sure that it's family friendly. But if they're doing contracts with people like HBO and that comes to pass, obviously it's going to broaden the age group, and there's going to be facilities that aren't family friendly.
How much money do you need to spend to determine if something's family friendly or not, do you think?
I mean, in this day and age, you don't have to spend as much money on market research, because market research people can effectively be replaced by algorithms to some extent. And to you have, that's why the data scientist exists. That's why this meme job came out of nowhere, is that someone is coming in and doing the job that 10 people used to do with a computer.
Super Iron Bob writes, hello, Super Iron Bob, great to see you. He writes, eventually we'll all be gargoyles a la Stevenson. Super Iron Bob says, no crash, people who are super plugged in all the time. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah, wireheads.
Well, that's an interesting kind of thing, because I'm curious about all you guys on how you just see the flat internet today. Because for me, the internet is this place you go into, and it's like this quantum random generator for new ideas and like new connections. And you could kind of plug it in and then come out into reality and ideally apply those ideas. What you found on Twitter, it's a way of like rapidly changing reality if you so choose to have it that way. I'm curious what you guys think, because then it extends into, okay, what's VR? Is it a place that we can simulate doing things and then come out into the world and be better? Or is it a place that we go into and we never escape from? I'm curious.
To me, it just feels like you're offloading RAM from your pineal gland or from your visualization capacities. It just feels like you're offloading that, and instead of having to visualize all this stuff that you're reading on Twitter, because I always get really strong visualizations in my head when I'm reading people's messages, and I always hear what they're like. I hear their voice when they're typing, and so I guess by going into VR, you're just kind of opening up more RAM in your brain for other stuff. So I wonder what the especially psychedelic implications are for something like that.
I don't see that as a good thing, though. At least at first glance, I don't. No, because I think that whenever we do something like, let's say, reading a book, it requires a lot more imagination, and it's another muscle that we train. And if we have a piece of media that we're, let's say, listening to, and a piece of media that we're listening to and observing, we don't need to train that muscle as much. So it feels like there's going to be less, for lack of a better word, consciousness that people are going to be able to exert in these realms if something else is doing it for them, if they're always being babysat, in other words.
Yeah, I'd actually like to touch upon that for a little bit. What I find interesting about VR is to what extent it will progress. I mean, I assume if we put on like a VR headset from the 90s, we would get some novelty enjoyment out of it, but we'd probably, not feel particularly immersed. But the way we see like through screens and stuff, there's already a degree of, psychological immersion, I suppose. Like if you see like a video of like someone hitting a baseball like towards the camera, and you see that baseball flying towards you, you're probably going to flinch a little bit. But with VR, we are constantly trying to make the immersion more real. Like I know now they're doing like sensors so you could feel things inside the VR realm. So progressively, I suppose, like how you said, Lev, like it will require less and less brain power. To what extent are we just going to be like, will there be no, like, very little brain activity at all in the VR realm?
Well, I wonder if it'll be like one of those microphones that relies on phantom power, where it's a two-way street. So depending on how much we merge like the human body with technology, like while these immersion and VR trends, go on through the decade, I imagine there'll be so many different variations. That would be my hope, is that it's not the Disney version or the Amazon version, and those are the only two picks. I think it'd be much better if you have a lot of different people experimenting and doing different degrees of immersion, and we'll learn over time, what causes more atrophy, what are environments that are like fitness camps where you don't even realize you're exercising because you're so caught up in the enjoyment and curiosity and excitement and novelty. It's interesting how the right kind of group can make tasks seem like they're not tasks, and a completely different group can make tasks seem like chores. And if you think about VR, I imagine there would be replicable dynamics where, you know, you'd see what works, but hopefully you wouldn't want it to just make everyone pulp, right? I think that's Lev's biggest fear, is that people are going to become so dependent on things like calculators. When things break down, no one will be able to do like paper math.
So like an idiocracy type thing is what you're alluding to.
Aiden?
Yeah, I have a fear of it, but it's not necessarily like, I think technological dependence can be good. It's that offloading RAM idea. But if you think of the brain as this like self-perpetuating information that's kind of cycling around in this electrical soup, and I think if you've ever had the feeling that an idea has come to you rather than you having thought it up, and then in essence, your mission is to bring that idea to life in some type of form. Well, what happens when we have too much stimulation coming in, say we're plugged into an experience of content, is that those ideas don't tend to come into our brain. And so this self-perpetuating algorithm that's absorbing a lot of content, in essence, is becoming the culmination of ideas that have already existed and brought into the world. So the ability for new ideas to come it starts to limit itself. And so I think technological dependence is going to happen, but it's more that when our heads are filled with so much stuff and not necessarily anything that has come to us, it's come through our senses, we lose something about ourselves, and that muscle, like you said, Lev, weakens. As far as I'm concerned in my own life, I feel like the internet's made me in some ways less visual as I used to be, just because I constantly have awesome visual stimulus to pull from.